Hello and welcome to this episode of Ways to Change Your Workplace with myself, Prina Shah. And I'm really excited to introduce you today to a HR leader who I have known for around a year now, Marija Andacic. Welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Lovely to have you here today, Marija. One caveat, I usually speak to people who I have worked with, and we've not had the pleasure of working with each other yet, but I just love your vibe, and we've had many a conversation about all things HR. So I asked Marija to chat to me today about the pleasures and sorrows of working in HR, Marija. a big
Great title.
So with that in mind, Marija, can you tell us about yourself? What do you do? How you got to where you are and why you do it, please?
Sure. Thanks.
Wow.
I kind of landed in HR inadvertently. So I guess if I go back to the start, I'd always wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to teach secondary students because I couldn't handle the little kids. I wanted to do social studies, geography, history, economics. Always had an interest in that. Did my TEE, and in those days when you had to submit your preferences for university, it was a big fat tisk book like that. I went to an open day with a friend. She was interested in doing psychology. She had a chat to one of the counsellors, and I sat there, flipped through the book, and landed on a double major in HR and IR at Curtin, and thought this looks really interesting. Something different. So I went and changed my preferences. My dad was wrapped. My mum was not. She wanted me to be a teacher. And loved it. I actually didn't really enjoy the HR units because I found them too fluffy. And those that know me know I'm pretty direct, know that I'm pretty honest. And I didn't like filler words, and I don't like filler words still. So it was interesting. I had to go and get my transcript the other day from Curtin, and the ones that I did really well in was industrial relations, employee relations, strategic HR, probably my highest marks, HR management.
Yeah.
Not really. It wasn't high on that aspect. So stayed in IR for a long time, and people go IR, HR, polar opposites. They're actually not. They complement each other, and a lot of IR concepts involve HR work, and I don't think the two should necessarily be separated as such. So certainly being an IR gave me a great grounding in terms of reasonableness, fairness, procedural fairness, ensuring that we advocated for staff as well as for the business that we were working in. Started in education, moved out through to health, worked at pretty much every single WA hospital except for regional and except for Fiona Stanley because that was newly built at the time. Had some really great exposure to our staff and also, some of the challenges that they face, especially our frontline staff. It's what they do is remarkable, and how they do it and under the circumstances that they do it is, I take my hat off to them. I couldn't do their job. So, and then got to a point where I was like, I need to do something else. And then ended up at Seven West Media as a senior HR business partner. Really enjoyed it, hit the ground running, learned a lot about business, learned a lot about how HR should be adding value in that space and why. And it gave me a really good understanding of the broader picture, which I guess tied me back into that whole economics business sort of space that I did at uni. From that, moved to Mercy Care, which is an intergenerational business, which we look after children from our early learning centres right through to our aged care people in our community, and then everything in between.
Wow.
We do homelessness, we do so many wonderful programs, family and community, care in the home. It's a wonderful place in terms of when you speak to the staff, they love it. They're really passionate about what they do. and they really enjoy working with the most vulnerable people in our society. And it's across the whole spectrum. So ended up in a HR manager role, and I look after the most important aspect of any business is payroll. I look after our volunteers as well as our employee relations and our talent space. So that's where I am at the moment. I love, as you know, I love talking. I do a bit of work with Curtin in terms of I've been their guest lecturer. I attend the HR Disrupted events, and every now and again get chosen to speak, provide an opinion. Sometimes people don't agree, that's okay. And I do a bit of mentoring with WA Police, which I absolutely enjoy. And yeah, it's good to do something other than just HR work.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you've had a brilliant and varied career in terms of the industries that you've supported in all of your roles. So going from government, health, through to media, TV, which must have just been something else, through to not-for-profit now. And all of those organizations have that link of community and people and serving Western Australia, which is where we live, and giving back to our community. So that's really interesting as well, Marija. And while you were talking, so for our audience, we've got a global audience and they may not understand IR. So industrial relations is what that is. And Marija is a renowned leader in HR, especially within the Western Australian scene. She's well known.
You're so nice.
So nice. Well, we got on and we started talking about our various experiences. And Marija, I've had a similar background to you in that I've supported many an industry when I was working in HR. And that's always interesting as well, because you really get to understand different workforces and their different needs as well. And how HR is perceived in all of these various mammoth organizations as well. So one question I have for you then, with that in mind, is that HR is a very important function in every organization. However, it is still disliked by many. Why do you reckon this is, your perspective?
I think a lot of the time people don't see what value we bring. And I think a lot of the time that's part of our own fault. Because we can't describe the value and we can't translate that value into real business numbers. And I think there's some challenges with that, and it's actually having the confidence to be able to say, we can analyze and we can provide workforce data, and data is really important, and gaining that data is really important to drive business decisions. If we look at, for example, turnover, if you've got a high percentage of turnover, you can actually translate that to a real cost. And say, well, if you've got 30% turnover and the average cost to hire, and onboard someone is, $4,500, or because you look at time and resources and advertising fees, over a span of a year, that's quite a lot of money. If you look at 30% turnover at $4,000, between $4,000 and $8,000 in terms of the cost, and you have 480 staff leave, it's $4 million. Like, it's a lot of money. And when you translate it like that, you go, so when you ask for an initiative that costs you $100,000 that is going to reduce turnover, you have something tangible that you can hold on to.
Absolutely.
And I think that's probably where HR comes unstuck, because we're driving initiatives and we're trying to push out initiatives, but you've got no buy-in. And the idea is you must get that buy-in, and you must be able to do it with stats and figures. And there is that the unknown, and that is something that we do need to look at, and that is about how our staff feel and what that pulse check is. And yes, we do employee surveys and pulse checks, and well, if you don't have people participating in it, why aren't they participating? And it's getting to the real crux of those issues and being able to then deliver them to executive and bring them on that journey of, knowledge transfer, and making sure that they understand that without their staff, we wouldn't be here.
Absolutely.
people drive profits, and whether you work for a not-for-profit, whether you work for a for-profit, regardless, you've got to make profit. It's still a business that you have to run.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure our people drive our performance and drive our profits? So I think there's that proof of adding value into that space. And we tend to be seen as disciplinarians, and we're not. I always describe the HR function as, you've got a footy team.
Yeah.
I'll go soccer because it's
my
sport.
Yeah.
You've got your captains who are your people managers, and you've got your coaches who are us. We coach the captains and the captains then deliver what needs to be delivered. But while we're doing that, we're also supporting the captain to achieve. And we're also supporting them and guiding them and saying, have you considered this? What about this? What about doing it this way?
Yeah.
That's part of our job too. And that's not a tangible outcome that you can actually measure.
No.
But it's really important in how we do stuff. And we're not disciplinarians. I always say to my colleagues and my managers, we don't hold those hard conversations. We teach you how to have them, and we will support you to have them, because it's important that you have those difficult conversations with your staff. And then it changes the nature of HR and changes the view of HR.
And that trust in the relationship with the leaders that you're supporting as well. They know that you've got their back. Absolutely. So.
Yeah.
You mentioned a really important point early on, Marija. You talked about being that employee advocate for all. Now, okay, this might be a bit of a controversial question, and just to note that Marija, when she's responding, she's not responding as her current job. Marija is responding. Marija is responding as Marija. She's not responding on behalf of any organization. So, okay, Marija, when I worked in HR, I tried my best to be neutral, the employee advocate for all, as you said, because I really do think that HR should be impartial. However, often HR are used for the benefit of the organization's interests versus the employee's interests. If one is working in HR, so we're going to have lots of HR people listening to this. How on earth do they deal with this quandary? Because we have all been there.
Yeah, you know what? I've been there too, and it's really hard, right? And fundamentally, it is about influence, and it is about credibility. And I think we as practitioners really need to be able to build our capacity to influence, and our ability to offer solutions that aren't always comfortable and aren't always the view of, the manager or the business or anything like that. But, if you have to be able to paint the bigger picture. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, because fundamentally the decision of the manager is the decision of the manager, and they wear that, which is why I always push back on, having HR drive those conversations, because that's not our job. And I always tell the managers, I see it from your perspective, but when you speak to the staff member, this is what they're going to say, and this is what they're going to consider. And certainly, I think there is an illusion that we are there equally for everyone. And I think we just need to kind of get to a reality point where we are to a point.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, we're still here to help drive the business.
Indeed. It's a real fine line as well, so if you fundamentally disagree with something ex-manager has decided upon, you have done the best to give your advice, or, our team that report to us. I think then also it's that fine line between, off you go, manager, you have got all of the goods now, we are here to support you. It is then up to that said leader or the manager to follow through with ideally the advice that we have given. If they don't, then I guess they have to wear it. But then I think you make really important points before you even begin. I think with any organization, it's about that influence and the credibility that you have, and that you bring not only to the executive team, but then to everyone that reports to you, as well as the whole HR team working as one. Because often many HR teams, can be fragmented, especially the larger the organization is, the larger the HR team is. And then it's just like, who is that person? I don't want to work with them. So establishing our credibility and influence is just such an important aspect of our role within HR. How have you gone about in your past roles in establishing that credibility, the trust, and the influence yourself, Marija?
It's a constant effort.
Yeah.
You know, I think once you go, oh, cool, great, I've got a great rapport with that person, you can't just sit on your hands.
No.
You have to constantly make the effort to do that. And I think credibility is built on trust, right? So trust that you know what you're talking about, trust that you understand it. But there's also an element of, you know, HR are seen to be the knowers of everything.
Yeah.
You know, and to a degree, we know a lot of things and we're competent in a lot of things, but also we're not.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's actually okay to go, you know what? I actually don't know, but I'll find the answer out for you. And that's okay.
Yes.
You know, so I think if you go in knowing it all, that's probably your first failure point, because we don't, and humans are fallible. So I think it's really important to be able to own, you know, your deficiencies as well as your strengths. Obviously playing your strengths as much as you can, which is where we're really good at, but also understanding your limitations and saying, you know what, I actually don't know.
Yeah.
But I'll find out for you. Or how about you show me, or how about you tell me? And it's that transfer of knowledge that's really important, because if you're interested and invested into what they're doing, then they're more likely to come to you and go, hey, what do you reckon? Yeah. And it might not be a direct HR matter, but it's building that relationship. It's that managing those stakeholders, managing the people that you work with, not just your team, not just your managers. It's everybody in the organization, as well as external too.
Yeah, as well as external too. Hello. Okay, I'm going to go on to that shortly now, Marija, as well. But you made a really good point about HR people sometimes don't know everything. And because of the fact that the world is just rapidly changing, and we haven't even used the C word, and I'm not going to, pandemic, COVID, just did. But with that, with everything else that's constantly changing as well, we have to continually evolve as HR practitioners. There's just a lot involved, you know, in terms of the knowledge that HR people have to constantly maintain. So with that as well, one question I have, so HR workers, I'm generalizing, generally speaking, tend to put off their own professional development, and they tend to put off working on their professional development and working on their professional brand, Marija, which I feel, that's my personal opinion, that's a loss for them. What advice do you give to HR people who are trying to break that mold, who do want to work on their own development and work on their own professional brand also?
Just do it.
Just do it.
It's like the Nike brand. Like there is absolutely no excuse for somebody not doing professional development, not working on their brand. You are your brand. You walk it, you talk it, the way you communicate. And whether that's via LinkedIn, whether that's internal, whether that's external, you cannot be a great HR practitioner if you don't have your own brand set. I just think, you know, there is so much data out there. There is so much information. There is so much research. I mean, Deborah Wilkes recently did, you know, a great paper through Enable HR. And, you know, I attended a session recently with Prina on it. And we sort of delved into those challenges of HR practitioners and building that confidence.
Yeah.
And it is all about having the confidence in yourself to be able to search. No one's going to do it for you.
No.
You know, and that's a life skill. I think that's something that is not just for HR people. It's for everybody. Anybody that works. Whether you're a frontline worker or whether you're a CEO, personal development, professional development should be something that is constant.
Absolutely. Because one thing I've seen HR people do is develop themselves potentially on IR legislation, industrial relations legislation and whatnot, because that's always evolving. But then beyond that, that thought leadership that ideally you should have as a HR practitioner of what's happening now, what our future is going to be, how we're going to take our organization and our people to there.
Yeah.
That's often lacking with that learning and
Yeah.
development of HR practitioners themselves. And that then leads to that point that you talked about earlier, Marija, in that to be influential, to be credible, to be seen as that, you need to have that brand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think if you put yourself in the silo, that's where you're going to stay.
yes.
So I think it's really important as practitioners. Yeah, you need to build in that, the current state, legislative changes. You've got your new workforce safety legislation coming in, and, you really should be across that, especially with stuff related to psychological safety. Yes. If you're not, then do it. But you need to look at global trends. You need to look at innovative thinking. You need to look at how agility can help in terms of what you're doing. You need to look at how do you design programs, and how do you, look at, like, I'm a big fan of that design thinking, human-centered design and innovation space. That's how you transform your business. That's how you transform the nature of work. And there is not a business out there that would benefit from it. I firmly believe that, but it's a dedication to teach yourself that. That's where it lands.
Allocating the time and not just constantly living in that busy culture, which
we're all busy. We are all busy. It's all about priorities.
Exactly. Now,
I tell my kids that all the time.
Yeah,
it's priorities.
We need to make ourselves a priority. It's so important. So like I said, we haven't worked together yet. So what is your own opinion of working with consultants? And the reason I ask is there's been debate often about HR people using consultants versus doing everything themselves as well.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
We can't do it all.
No.
Unless you're resourced to do it, you can't do it all. And we're not experts in everything. So why wouldn't you seek out an expert to do some work for you? That's not to say that you can't work together. That's not to say that you can't set some, I think that initial scoping, really important. Some consultants, there are some bad ones out there, and there are some really, really good ones. And it's a bit like saying there are some really bad HR practitioners out there, and there's some really good ones.
Indeed.
Unfortunately, it's those few that are bad that give everybody else, the same, they'll get painted with the same brush. So I think consultants have a place, and I think they can add value in conjunction with, if you are getting a consultant in and it's a set and forget, I think you miss the mark. I think you have to be involved. You have to be actively looking at what they're doing, how they're doing it, and setting the expectations and the outcomes, and being prepared for the truth. There are some HR managers who go, well, we want this, but maybe you can you adjust your report, or can you adjust the tone or anything like that? I'm like, nah, I just want it raw, thanks.
Amazing.
Give it to me so I know exactly what I need to fix. So there's a place for them, definitely. The key is to finding the right ones.
Absolutely. And I think you make a really, really important point there. And, other HR practitioners may have been burnt by using bad consultants. So the thing, like yourself, when I used to work in HR, is I would work in partnership. And I would share with the consultant, this meets my strategic plan in this respect. This is how you are going to be supporting me to meet my goals.
Yeah.
The other thing I also, you have to have that open communication with whatever consultant that you bring. It's so important.
100%. Yeah.
Your reputation at the end of the day, and it's related to people. And if things go wrong, you're going to hear about it first and foremost. So the other thing I also used to ask, when relevant and when viable, is a report, like you said, at the end of the project, just so there's that independent report of someone else to prove that this is what was done and this is the outcome that's happened. So that if you ever need to go back to anything in the future as well, you've got that as evidence, which is beyond your own knowledge. And you can use that for business cases and whatever else in the future also. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So consultants and HR people cannot do everything, and nor should they do everything. There's boundaries we need to have as HR practitioners when working internally. Sometimes it's just inappropriate to be doing X, Y, or Z, and you do need that consultant for it, a neutral third person, but to work in partnership. Absolutely. Marija, do you have any practical tips for any up and coming HR stars who are listening into you?
Oh, I think it's don't be scared. You know, don't be scared to do something that you're not, that you don't completely have all the information for.
Yes.
HR is all about being able to learn and being able to adapt and, get out of your comfort zone. Change and growth is difficult, and it's supposed to be difficult because that's how you learn. So being uncomfortable is actually okay, to a degree. But just don't be afraid to give everything a go. And I think there's, when you come fresh out of uni and you go, well, out of all these units, I loved IR. And I talk about myself. I loved IR, and I did, and I still do, and it's still one of my passions. And I was like, I'm never doing HR, and look where I am. I'm doing HR.
Yeah, never say never.
It's one of those, it's just one of those things. Just give it a go, and give talent a run. Like, I think it's, as a rounded professional, you have to have some understanding in all facets.
Yeah.
So give it a go. Otherwise, you risk being pigeonholed and not being able to move.
Yeah. And yeah, that's a very good point. I've seen people who are closer to the midpoint or, end of their career who've said, damn, I wish I'd chosen different areas of working in HR, because that would have made my skills more transferable so I could jump around. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good point.
I've just brought I've got a new staff member that works with us, and, she's just done her master's, and the idea is that she sits under talent more just from a reporting perspective.
Yeah.
But she'll get exposed to ER, she'll get exposed to payroll, she'll get exposed to, that whole life cycle.
Yeah. And that's what makes a true HR practitioner, knowing the full aspect of all of HR. You talked earlier about your external network, and I think it's really important for HR practitioners to have a good external network. Often, again, HR practitioners just stay within their bubble of their organization. What are your thoughts on that, and how are you managing it? Tell me external networks.
Yeah, there's a few points. One being, having external HR practitioners outside of your bubble is great, because you can bounce things off. So I have access to HR practitioners in the NFP space. I also have access to HR practitioners in manufacturing and building and media and health and a variety of different industries, because they do things different. And you go, well, that might work and that might not. But I also have people that I tap into that are not from HR.
Yeah.
They either run their own business, or they're a CEO, or they're a coach, or, psychologist. Like, I think it's really important to really have a wide network of people that you touch base with. And that doesn't mean that you have to touch base with them every day, or, once every 3 months or once every 6 months. It's really important. Like, I have access to, people that I touch base with at Waypole. Like, they don't have anything to do with HR, but they manage people. And it's people. At the end of the day, people are people. It doesn't actually matter what role you do. It gives you that breadth of knowledge.
Yeah.
It gives you, a bit broader understanding for a more generalized approach to HR.
Yeah, it's moving beyond our bubble, our echo chamber of HR. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely.
Agreed. Look, don't get me wrong, it's really important to establish those HR networks, because it's also the knowledge sharing. Hey, what did you do on EVP, or what did you do on COVID policy, or what did you do on this? Can you share it? Yeah. And, we do, and it's great. And it also kind of sets a benchmark of, well, these are what everybody else is doing. So, we probably need to do the same or similar. So that's really important too.
Yeah. For those who are listening in, by the way, I'm going to put Marija's contact details. So if you want to reach out to her as well, you are welcome to in the show notes. Marija, I've got one final question for you, which I ask everybody. If I was to give you a magic wand and ask you what is one way you would change the way of the workplace, what would it be?
That's a really good question. There are so many things running through your mind. I think keep it simple. Listen to your people.
Tell me more.
So, you know, your people are your barometer, like your thermometers, not barometers, but I guess they are too. They're a weather space. They will either work for you or work against you. And I think it's really important to have that, you know, you've got your hierarchy and you've got your org chart and do that diagonal sort of crossover. I think it's really important to have your fingers on the pulse, you know, because they're the ones that will either support the initiatives that you put in place or not. So I think as an organization, people need to come before profits, because your people are making your profits. And without your people, you wouldn't have your business. So it's really simple. Listen to your people.
Yeah. Do you have examples of how in past roles you have listened to people, you know, in that respect?
Yeah, I think there's an element of it really depends. Like, I've been fortunate enough to work across lots of different industries, and you know, what works in one business won't work in another. And it's about asking those questions of, you know, open-ended questions. What makes you stay?
Yeah. Really
simple. What makes you stay? What would make you leave? And it's stopping it at the past, because if people go, I'm really frustrated at the fact that, I'm going to use a really silly example, but it's actually happened. You know, my monitor hasn't been working for the better part of 6 months.
Oh.
Like, you just fix it. And it's just those little things that people get annoyed at, because they want to come to work and be happy at work. You spend a lot more time at work than you do at home. So, you know, if you can make it comfortable and enjoyable and obviously challenging, then, you know, your people will speak for itself.
Completely. And as HR practitioners, we have so many touch points with people, formal and informal, where we can listen and check in. You know, the formal measures being culture surveys, engagement surveys, and all that kind of stuff. But then informally, when you're having meetings, when you're walking around, kitchen conversations, you know, pulse checks.
Those water cooler conversations are so important.
Aren't they the best?
I actually say to my team, I don't want you sitting at your desk. I don't want to see you sitting at your desk all week. You need to be out and about. COVID, you know, has kind of kabushed a bit of that, but get out and about. Just go sit in an office in one of our facilities, and what you hear is priceless.
Yes.
You know, it's that emotional connection versus that contractual connection versus that, you know, experiential connection. Like, there are so many facets that we are privileged to tap into.
Yes.
Just don't abuse that privilege.
Perfect. Don't abuse that privilege. On that note, I will call it an end. And Marija, I think we could talk even more about so much more. Until the next time. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure.